What's up, everybody? So a big issue is the so-called forks and what happens when you, as like an account holder at an exchange, aren't able to participate in the fork because the exchange doesn't effectively pay out. And so the question is there liability for that? And the question is, or the answer rather, is a bit yes and no, right? First, when you're talking about all these Bitcoin type forks, the problem is no one really owns the software, right? And my gut would be that, much like a stock split in the equity world, right, you have an obligation to deliver on that stock split, or like a dividend, right? But in the crypto world, you don't have transfer agents, you don't have registrars, which is a huge problem. And the reality is, like, in the absence of that, right, a third-party intermediary that could sort of effectuate, would know who the holders are, would know who to deliver the forked coin to. You have to go back to the source. And as it relates to Bitcoin forks, there really is no source. Like, there's no real party that controls it or owns it. So the liability is kind of muted, right, for you not getting it. There's some type of, with MIT and the software, there's a foundation and all that, but they don't really own it. They just sort of operate it, right? And that's conceptually what Bitcoin's all about. But, you really have no recourse against the, the so-called issuer, right? Alternatively, the question becomes, do the exchanges themselves have an obligation to deliver on forks? And I don't think they necessarily do. I don't, as far as I can tell, my review is that there's no particular obligation in any sort of the operating agreements that you agree to when you open an account, and there's no way to really accept delivery in each of these wallets at each of these exchanges to really participate in that fork. So I think the liability it's a bit specious, because you can't necessarily compel them, the exchanges that is, to issue you new assets, right? It's a huge revenue thing that they're not obviously seizing on, because conceivably, if they did do it, right, if an exchange did want to participate in XYZ fork, they would conceivably charge you a fee for it, much like in your brokerage account when there's like a name change or when there's like a dividend or anything, you get charged, right? It's part of the process. So, they're leaving that on the table, but I don't know how you mechanically or legally compel them to participate in like these Bitcoin type forks. Now, the Z Classic scenario is a little bit different, right? Because Z Classic, you know who it is, right? Somebody owns it. The software is a commercial enterprise, okay? And the fork that they just did, right, they should have the obligation, Z Classic should, to deliver on that, right? They have an obligation to, however they mechanically need to do it, look at the ledger and actually deliver whatever the forked amount should be. And you have recourse against them, in my opinion, because they exist, right? They're there, they own it, they're controlling it, and they're allowing for this fork, but they're doing nothing to necessarily ensure that each of their holders are delivered on the forked tokens, right? And that right, the right to receive the forked token, is derived from the investment, right, or the purchase or the use of the Z Classic, right? It's one and the same. And so everybody needs to be treated pro rata, and everybody needs to be, receive the delivery. Whether or not like a particular exchange does or doesn't, allow for it, that's immaterial, right? These exchanges are nothing more than money transmitters. And so the onus goes back to the original issuer, which is Z Classic. So, I think there's recourse there, right? I think you see, a lot of people who haven't been able to participate in the fork undoubtedly wanted to, and they're left thinking, well, I'm going to go after, the exchange and all that. The exchange doesn't, again, they don't necessarily have that obligation to participate, but Z Classic has an obligation to treat all of its holders evenly, right? And even if that's problematic or difficult, or it has to be done, manually in a sense, like where, they have to go in and literally issue the tokens to everybody or create some way to do it, that's a problem, right? That's a liability. So, I think not all forks are obviously the same. I think the Bitcoin ones, there's really not a whole lot you can do because there's not really anybody to go after. Other scenarios where you've got an actual foundation, you have people behind it, it's a commercial enterprise, there's a fork, then I think not only do you have like intent, right, and an obligation and a fiduciary duty on the part of that entity, but you also have recourse when they don't participate in the fork. So give me a call if you're running into that problem. Check my website out, bitcoin-lawyer.org. I'm Adam Tracy. Talk to you later.